Hey, what's going on, guys? In this video, I want to talk about how I managed to study about 25 hours a week working full-time studying for my CPA exams. If you know anything about the CPA exams, you know that they are an absolute beast. They take a ton of time commitment. They can be extremely frustrating. The amount of content is just tremendous. And so in this video, I want to get into how I'm dividing up my time in each week, what I'm doing in those study sessions to make them the most effective, and my overall strategy that hopefully will bring me to success in conquering all four parts of the CPA. Now, it's really only in the last couple weeks that I've been getting into the brunt of my CPA exam prep. So you guys are really joining with me as I sort of implement this strategy, but I'm excited to share it with you because I think it stands a pretty good chance of success. So without further ado, let's get into it and talk a little bit more about my exam study process. Before we get right to the details, let's get one thing out of the way. If you are finding yourself sitting down in front of Becker, Wiley, Gleim, or whatever other program that you're using, and you are sitting down for your study session and you just feel completely overwhelmed, this is entirely normal. I just want to make that clear. It's not normal to consume this much information and have to regurgitate it on a very standardized exam. It's an extremely overwhelming process. And so if you're feeling that, which I completely have been feeling that, you aren't alone in this process, and almost anyone who decides to embark on this journey of sorts is going to feel overwhelmed at various times. It's going to feel overwhelming in the beginning, and that should dissipate as you go along, but there are going to be moments where there are certain aspects of the material that are just challenging. It was just earlier this week that I was dealing with cash to accrual conversions, and it's just challenging. It can be hard to just wrap your head around what's going on in that particular aspect of a topic that you're struggling with. At the end of the day, you know that many other people have taken these exams, passed these exams, and gone on to have excellent careers. So keep that in mind. It is doable, and these exams will fall for you. It's just going to take some consistent effort on your part to see it through. Okay, so step one for me when I was trying to decide how I was going to tackle this study process was just getting a basic idea of how much time I needed to commit to study for just one of these exams. Was this a 30-hour commitment? Was it a 100-hour commitment? Was it a 500-hour commitment? Let's just get some number, some practical number in our minds so that we know kind of what we're shooting for. So that we know around a certain hours mark, we should be feeling somewhat competent with the material. I don't know if that's helpful for you, but for me, that was very helpful. That was kind of a metric that I could just think, okay, if I can set up my study schedule in such a way that it's gonna carry me to that X amount of hours, I probably stand a pretty good chance of, knocking this out of the park. After doing a bunch of reading online and consulting with some friends who have taken their CPA exams, it seems that there's a range of hours that people typically study, anywhere from 160 to 240 hours for each of their CPA exam sections. Now, I'm studying for FAR right now, and that tends to be the most rigorous of all the exams. And so that's probably going to trend closer to that 200 to 240 hour mark. I think maybe some other exams like BEC, that might be a little bit lighter of a workload, of a study load. And so maybe that trends closer to 160, but this hour mark, I think, can give you a pretty good idea of what you're working with when you are working on setting up your own schedule. Once I knew my hours goal, I could just break that down into the number of weeks that I personally had available to study for FAR. I did some more research into this, and it seems for a lot of folks who are studying for these exams while working full-time, it takes about 8 to 10 weeks, with 10 weeks being a pretty long amount of time for most people to prepare. What I've read is that people who take 10 weeks to prepare actually say that they begin to forget some of the material that they covered in the early weeks of their preparation. So I'm seeing 8 weeks pop up again and again as a really good time frame, maybe 9 weeks as a period of time to study and prepare well for, especially for FAR and for all these exams in general. So in my situation, I thought, okay, let's take 8 weeks, 200 hours, and that's gonna divide out to be about 25 hours a week of studying. Now, on top of working full-time, that is a lot of time commitment. My life is pretty much work and study. That's about the extent of it. But this is all temporary pain for long-term gain. And honestly, I think that's a pretty valuable principle. There is no gain without some amount of pain. It takes some degree of suffering usually to move the ball forward. So here we are getting our little sufferfest on and attempting to have a good time while we're doing it. So that is the bare bones structure of what we are working with. We have 8 weeks, 25 hours a week, and hopefully that will take us to a successful passing of FAR. Now the question is, how are we going to get those 25 weeks in every single week consistently? I needed a schedule that I could commit to, something that was realistic, not overly optimistic, that takes things into account like real life and other commitments and all the things that tend to pop up. And so I started thinking, and again did some reading online about what other people did, and here's how it has shaken out for me. I like to wake up at 5:30 a.m. Yes, you heard that right, 5:30 a.m. It is an absolutely brutal and ungodly time to have to wake up. I don't recommend it to anyone, and I also am not someone who just naturally wakes up at 5:30 a.m. Anyone who says that they naturally wake up at 5:30 a.m. must either have a sleeping condition or go to bed at like 7 p.m. So it is an early wake-up call. Realistically, I'm not getting out of bed right at 5:30 usually. So by the time I stumble downstairs and get my cup of coffee and we're really getting things rolling, it's a lot closer to 6 than 5:30. But from 6 to 7 or 6 to 7:30, that's a solid hour to an hour and a half of study time that is really uninterrupted. I can just grind it out, get all of those questions done, blow through the lectures, and typically by 7 or 7:30 I have an hour and a half of pretty good studying under my belt for the day. After I study, I go off to work, and work for me is typically 8 to 5 or 8 to 6, just depending on the workload. I do work in public accounting, so that can shift a bit, but definitely in the fall it is a slower time, so the schedule has been pretty reasonable. I get home from work 6 or 6:30. Whenever that is, it varies from day to day, but the goal is to start studying by about 7 o'clock. And I want to get in about 2 hours of studying every night. This all nets out to be about 3 hours of study a day. And I keep this schedule up Monday through Friday, except I do take a break on Friday night. I saw this method recommended online, and it's just a great way to take a break because studying and working can really consume your life. And so oftentimes on Friday nights, I'll just spend it with my wife, or if my friends are hanging out, I'll go see them. It's just a really good way to recharge because along this path, you definitely do need to take time for yourself to just have a moment, take a deep breath, and enjoy a little bit of life, even though most of the other time you are just sort of suffering away. So by doing this through the entire work week, I actually managed to get about 15 quality hours of studying in before the weekend even hits. With the weekend, that leaves me about 10 hours left to study to hit my goal of 25 hours. And I can divide this up whatever way I like. For me personally, I do like to front load it on Saturday so that my Sunday's a little more freed up. So if I feel good, I'll do 6 or 7 hours on Saturday and then knock out the rest on Sunday. But I'm also quite sensitive to just how I'm doing with the material. If it's very frustrating and I can only get 4 or 5 quality hours in, I'll just cut it there and pick it back up the next day. A lot of this material is very mentally fatiguing, and I think it's important to be aware of that as you're moving through it, because how you feel is somewhat important in terms of how you retain the information and how well you can really work with the material. Here are a couple extra tips I want to give you guys that I've been picking up on so far that have helped me. With the amount of work and studying that you are going to be doing, I think it's very important to take breaks. My favorite break that I've found so far, or the most effective sort of little recharge, is actually just a quick 20 to 30 minute walk. I like to do these after work or before work, and it really just sort of gets me outside, gets a little vitamin D going, and allows me to get some fresh air. There's just a lot of benefits of getting that little bit of movement. If you're working, there's a good chance that you're in a chair all day and then you come home to study and you're in a chair again. So it's important to just sort of move the body and get some deep breaths and just enjoy being outside a little bit. For me personally, that's been huge. Another tip I'd give, which is more of a mindset tip, is the idea between I need to pass versus I want to pass. I think when I get overwhelmed with these exams, I've been feeling like telling myself that I need to pass, as if I'm desperate to pass this exam, which I definitely feel desperate sometimes. But I like to put myself in the driver's seat a little bit more and tell myself that I want to pass. I chose to take these exams. I chose to study accounting, and I chose this career path. And these exams will fall because this is something that I want, and I'm going to see this through and stay the course. The last tip I'd say is there are times when you're just flowing. You're moving through a lot of the material and you're feeling good. Maybe you come across a section that you just understand a lot better than the others. For myself, I like to crush through that material faster and capitalize on those sort of rare good feeling moments. That means that sometimes I will study for 2 hours when I was just gonna study for 1 hour. And so keep that in mind, that sometimes you can stack up hours when it's just going well. I think that's a good way just to, again, stack up a couple extra hours of study time with the material and get yourself all that more familiar. On the flip side of this, there are nights when I just want to study for 1 hour, or maybe I take a night off altogether. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think that one single night or one single alteration of the schedule is going to have much of an outcome on my exam grade. I just think that we are human beings, life happens, and sometimes the plan needs to change. And you can accommodate for that plan down the road if you feel that it's necessary. So keep that in mind too. Don't beat yourself up. It's not necessarily the plan that's going to take you there. It's the effort along the way. So keep the effort up and you'll be just fine. I hope this video is helpful for any of you who are studying for your CPA exams or who are considering doing so down the road. It's a huge grind, and just wrapping your mind around what it's going to look like, I think is really, really helpful. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you are still with me on the video here, you might enjoy my weekly newsletter. You can sign up for it at calmills.substack.com, and I talk about all sorts of things that don't necessarily make the videos. So it might be more productivity tips or things on personal finance or self-development. So if you enjoy the topics that we talk about here on the channel, feel free to sign up for the newsletter, and I'd love to see you there. That's all for now, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.